this time, I'll call the Budget Committee meeting to order and ask Angelique to please call roll.
Kaler.
Here.
Hannum.
Present.
Lewis. Here. Mitchell.
Here.
Moon. Here. We have a quorum.
I'll now ask for the emergency announcement to be read, please.
Before we get started, let me read the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles.
I'll now ask if there's any public input on items on the agenda. Any input on items on the agenda? Seeing none, item D, the minutes have been included in your packet that need approval. They're from the June 6, 2016 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Have a motion. Do I have a second? Is there any discussion? I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Adjustments, increases, and decreases. On the financial portion of the agenda, E1A, school budget, $1,639,000. It's amendment to fiscal year 16-17 budget. And before we even start, I'm going to have Troy or David come up and just explain what this is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is David Merle. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Britt, our Director of Schools, was unable to be here today, out of town for business, and Mr. Logan was on vacation today. So you have before you this evening our final budget request. In May, our board approved a balanced budget that did not require any additional requests for any sales tax, on any more cents on the tax rate, sorry. So we waited to make sure that would hold at the June board meeting, or commission meeting, I apologize, and then we bring it to you today, and it does have an increased use of fund balance. So you have a memo in there that tells you the cuts that were made in our budget in order to come in line with what we were granted, and also have 3 increases. We've made use 3% increase in growth in sales tax, and you see that with $397,000, and our increased use of fund balance of $1.24 million, and then of course increased state BEP revenues by $2,000. So do you all have questions about that this evening?
Yeah, I got a question.
Go ahead.
What's the current fund balance?
So from a budget perspective only, so if you look at out to June 30th, 2017, so if you were assuming the revenues and expenditures were the same, which we know will not occur, but you'll see a fund balance of $3.62 million, which is around 4% of our budget. So it's above the 3% required by the state. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have a question as well around your fund balance. Are there any statutory requirements as to your fund balance, how much you must maintain at any one given time?
3%. It's required to have a 3% going into the budget year, which is approximately $2.7 million for us. So as I mentioned to Mr. Kaler's, right now we have, just for budget perspective only, is $3.62 million. So almost $1 million over the required.
So is this recurring? How's this going to affect any future budgets going forward?
I'm not sure. Randy, could you help me with that question? Could you ask that again?
Is this a one-time You're
I see
coming
what
for a
you're saying.
one-time increase?
Yes.
How's it going to affect any future budgets? Is this going to be an ongoing expense? And it looks to me like it will.
I mean, there's some one-time expenditures in our budget to account for, especially some of the capital expenditures, parking lots, HVAC, different things of that nature. So I don't know exactly how to answer that best, but there are some one-time expenses. So going into next year, there will be some turn back from line items that weren't fully expended. So at this point, I can't really answer that for sure. But you know, there are one-time expenses, so we have used fund balance to balance our budget.
And how will this affect our maintenance of effort?
It does not, to my knowledge. I can't really answer that completely. Randy may be able to. The commission has an obligation to do that.
All right. Maintenance of effort is a function of all locally derived revenues to fund the school system. Those would be sales tax, property tax, I think alcoholic beverage, maybe in beer tax and things like that. Back to so by definition, that's a calculation they go through in the fall of the year for the past year, previous year, and they'll run that calculation. Your earlier question where David kind of asked me the question, the current budget that commission has approved is funding for $89.2 million budget roughly. And of that, about 1.9 million is a use of fund balance to address some things that David mentioned, some capital things in their operating budget. You have approved a budget, or the commission has approved a budget that also sets up a education capital fund that is specifically funded with 4 cents of the property tax rate. So they're funding capital. The school board is funding capital over and above that 4 cents. So if I misrepresent your comment, correct me, but what I hear you asking, if this request were to be approved to appropriate an additional $1.6 million or $1.2 million worth of fund balance, how do you replace that in the next budget year, fiscal 18? Is that right? So that's the way I understand the question.
My question, are we anticipating that operating revenues are going to increase next year? Is that would be the only way that this would not have to be funded again next year? Is that not correct, Randy?
You would have to, use of fund balance is a non-recurring source of money, of funding. Our natural growth in revenue in most any county, but talking specifically about Blount County, we get no sales tax. That goes to the education, debt service fund, the small piece, and then the rest of it goes to the highway fund. So any elasticity in our revenue growth is really centered on sales tax, and schools benefit along with the other two functions of government. So property tax is what we rely on predominantly to fund general county, to a lesser extent, the school system. The growth there has to be in the value of the penny. So property values have to appreciate from a market standpoint to be able to generate for a penny to be worth more. So for example, the fiscal 16 budget, we assumed a penny would generate $317,500. The budget that commission has approved was predicated on a penny generating $327,500. So $10,000 a penny. That was the growth in the tax base. So in the school system's case, they have to hope that you would have continued growth in the property tax base, continued growth in sales tax, and additional money in BEP. That's the 3 largest funding sources that the school system has. Now, You tell me if the economy is going to grow that way. I have no earthly idea. All I read about is how little global growth we're going to have, period. So the one shining star is this country right now in the world economy. So I'm not smart enough to project that.
Commissioner?
All things being equal, Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, or David, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. We're already using 1.9 million out of fund balance projected at 3.62. We taken, or maybe that's projected at 3.62 after the 1.2 additional. Is that accurate, David?
That is correct.
And so,
Well, 3.62 is what it would be left for budgetary purposes, what is left in fund balance. That's what we budgeted for
So
FY '17.
okay, so we would be taking 3.1 million total out of fund balance in order to balance this year's budget. And I think the question was, what do we do next year if we're sitting here, we need another 3.1 and we're sitting with a fund balance of 3.6?
I can't answer that question today.
Thank you.
And I have one more question as well. I'm seeing here a cut to capital and facility outlay for parking lot paving, HVAC, flooring, and student furniture, which we just recommended that the commission fund. Is that what I'm seeing?
Some of that will come out of the 177, so especially the HVAC systems. We will still do some parking lot paving. Some of that was cut compared to what Mr. Farmer and his department had estimated we needed to do this year. There'll be still some of that going on, but we had to make cuts to those areas. We'll still do some things out of 177 as well that are considered capital. I don't know, is there?
Thank you.
Let me make sure that everybody's on the same page. The memo that we have in the packet from Troy, just as a point of reference, when Troy itemizes cuts, and if I misspeak, correct me.
Go ahead.
It's predicated on cuts to the Board of Education's first budget recommendation that they submitted to the Budget Committee, which was a budget of $93.3 million. So keep that in mind. Cuts are reductions from what they originally asked for. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
But I mean, they're completely cut out. There's still some things left in those areas, but we did have to make some cuts to certain areas of things we wanted for the school system.
Randy, at the commission level, is it customary to say that we've passed a balanced budget when we use a significant amount of fund balance to balance the budget? That's my question.
If the use of fund balance can be tied specifically to one-time revenues, I think that's a true statement. If it can't be tied to that, then technically no, you've balanced the budget, but you're using your savings account to do it. You are not generating current revenue streams to pay for current expenditures.
Randy, one question. If we're using fund balance and we're using it with the idea that we're projecting increases in the revenue next year, and next year the revenue is not equal to what we are projecting it by moving this out of fund balance, so we're going to have a shortfall. Am I right in assuming that if that shortfall shows up, that could, then the only way to cover that would be a tax increase? Is that, if these projected increases that we're thinking are going to happen don't happen, and we've used fund balance, and some of this is reoccurring cost, how are we going to make up that? How would you make it up? What are we setting ourselves up for next year?
Well, the simple answer is yes. I mean, the potential is there. I'm not smart enough to sit here and tell you we're going to have that kind of revenue growth. I don't think anybody in this room can, frankly, including the school folks. So you don't have an option of increasing sales tax, and you couldn't make that happen even if everybody was lined up to do it, because you'd have to go to vote a referendum. We're already at state max, so that option's off the table. So property tax is that's our primary revenue stream in this county.
Okay. Is there any other questions or discussion? I'll now ask, do I hear a motion to send this on to the commission with recommendation from the Budget Committee? Do I hear a motion? This item fails for lack of motion. David, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item E1B, emergency management, $16,200, appropriate funds for the awards of the hazmat grant. Lance,
Yes, sir.
explain that to us, please.
Yeah, this is a $16,200 grant from TEMA. And what it amounts to is every year we have our hazardous materials equipment planning grant drill. And we've got three agencies in Blount County that have hazmat teams. Of course, you all know it's Maryville, Alcoa, and Blount County Fire Departments. Each year it rotates. This year, and in the past, it was a given $7,200 we were going to get each year, and that money was used for equipment for the agency that was sponsoring the drill that year. Last year it was Blount County, and they got $7,200 for some gas meters. This year is Maryville, next year will be Alcoa. What's different in this year's grant, though, is it became a competitive grant, which meant that there was no guarantee we were going to get it. And basically it was through TEMA. We made our application in January, and fortunately we got it. It's about a $19,000 or $20,000 grant total. There's a $4,000 match, but it's an in-kind match. So the $4,000 we're putting toward this is a little bit more than $3,000 of that is just in salaries for firefighters. They're going to be there anyway. And then the rest of it is just expenses that we were going to put toward the drill. So we don't have to cut a check to put toward this. It's just an in-kind match. So the $16,200 would go again toward Maryville Fire Department. They're going to buy I think a Promethean board, and then 3 Tough Book tablets that they're going to be able to put in their fire trucks that would be able to help them in the midst of a hazardous material incident. It's going to have all the information they need in those Tough Books. And so anyway, we won this. We got this grant. I think it was about 3 months ago. Andrew Rose with TEMA in Nashville notified us that we got it, and so we're just asking that the money be appropriated to purchase these items. More likely than not, the timetable for the reimbursement will be later this year, so it'll probably be November, December, at the very latest, January of next year that we'll be reimbursed for this. But so, as you know, with the grant, you basically make the purchase and you keep all your documentation in hand, and they reimburse you. So, any questions?
Have any questions or discussion?
I just have a comment, just to the board in general. Since this grant will benefit the City of Maryville Fire Department, and I am an employee, I've said I will abstain from the vote.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move we send this forward to the agenda committee with a positive recommendation.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Kaler,
Abstain.
Hannum,
Yes.
Lewis, Mitchell,
Yes.
Moon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Thank you, Lance. Item E1C, Recovery Court, $17,000 appropriate increase for the SAMHSA grant funding. Randy, will you explain to us what that is exactly?
The SAMHSA grant is one they've gotten for the past couple of years, but they just decided to increase the funding that they offered to the Recovery Court this year by $17,000. So they're just appropriating those additional funds.
Okay. Is there any questions or discussion on that? If not, I'll ask for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion, do I have a second? Motion and a second. Hearing no discussion or questions, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Kaler.
Yes.
Hannum. Lewis. Mitchell.
Yes.
Moon. Motion passes.
Item E1D, Ag Extension 1039, appropriate unutilized fiscal year 15-16 salary dollars to match the university step increases, and this falls in line with the BC step increase system. John, you want to come up and, is John here? John, will you come up and explain what that is exactly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. We'd gotten word notification from the university there in the last few days of June after the bulk of the FY 16-17 budget requests were in place that the legislature had approved a 1.5% increase for the staff members here. And the university gives increases on their side of the equation, which is a cooperative funding shared arrangement. And so they will move forward to make that, and then they ask of us if we can make that same request on the county portion of the salary. So that's a reason for the lateness of trying to make an amendment and get an additional $1,039 to fund those increases.
Okay, do I have a motion to send this on? Have a motion, do I have a second? Motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion for John? Yeah. All right, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Kaler.
Yes.
Hannum.
Thank you, John.
Lewis.
Thank you.
Mitchell.
Yes.
Moon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item F, discussion and possible action. Blount County Sheriff's Office JAG grant. This is no match required, and this is for information only. Does anyone wish to hear any information on that? Okay. Also, fiscal year 16-17 budget update. This is some updates from the Sheriff's Office. Sheriff, would you like to come up and talk about this? Turn his mic on, please.
Sorry.
Is the situation we're facing. A fellow commissioner of yours, Mr. Tona Monroe Ball, has recklessly went to different areas of the state of Tennessee and even as far as the Washington, D.C. and the federal government and circumvented an office holder, which is myself and the operation of the Sheriff's Office. This is going to be a dire stress on the taxpayers. She wants credit for these actions. I'm going to give her credits for them, but she's also going to suffer the repercussion of the lost income that the citizens will suffer and the lost community services that the Sheriff's Office does throughout the community, animal shelter, 1IE, on and on and on. The problem we're facing right now is the state has chosen, at this point, taken all but 30, 40 inmates out. Their plans is to take the rest out by, I'm not going to tell you the date because moving inmates is something we'd like to do discreetly, but one day this week they'll be taken out of our facility unless the state changes. The problem we're in right now is those inmates cook. We have an employee in there and 8 inmates cooking. The inmates do laundry, so we're going to have to come up with some funds to go out here until we get a contract in place, and purchasing has been working with us in the mayor's office diligently trying to get us scrambled around to be able to feed 1,600 meals a day. And whether we go to McDonald's till we get something in place or Hardee's or wherever it may be, we've got to feed over 1,600 meals a day. And that's just one component. Laundry, we checked today about what it would cost to do laundry out. You add it up for a year on one kind of just a filler of what they said it would cost, it's $480,000. This county will be short $2.7 million in revenue from the state. Now, we wanted rid of some of the state prisoners, don't get me wrong, but they wouldn't honor the sheriff of Blount County and take him and let us choose who we wanted to send and keep our workers that were classified that can go out here and work the streets and work in the laundry and work in other areas of the sheriff's office. They listened to her. Now the rest of the sheriffs are up in arms at TDOC that they've been requesting just like we had, and they didn't take their inmates either. But the shortfall is going to be well over 15 to 16 cents on the tax rate. And that's not counting the things we're adding in, that we're finding the maintenance in the courthouse, Justice Center lawns, the mechanical things they do. So I just wanted to update you. We're in a panic state almost at the sheriff's office, how we're going to cook, clean, maintain areas. Now, things like Friendsville, inmates have been helping them put the system in down there. They're gone. They're gone. Animal shelter. I don't know what you're all going to do about the 2 inmates that work 10 hours a day out the animal shelter. Who's going to fund that? But I'm just telling you, you're going to see some emergency purchase orders in here. I, by law, and you, by law, have to feed the inmates and do other things. Hopefully, we're going to get a contract with a company in the near future that will come in and do the cooking for us, so we won't have to rely or depend on this. But she wants credit for this. She's going to get it, but she ought to get the consequences and the repercussions to the taxpayers of the citizens of Blount County for circumventing a sheriff or any office holder with limited knowledge and not thinking about the repercussions. I've never seen anything this blatant in my 26 years as an office holder. So obviously I'm upset to see this happen. I'm upset because I'm a citizen and a taxpayer. And I'm gonna, as a citizen, I'll have to burden some of these. As a taxpayer, I'll have to burden some of these consequences. As sheriff, I'm gonna have to deal with these consequences that we're suffering. Obviously, I'm fired up a little bit about this, and I should be. But if anybody have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, I got a question. Sheriff, how much, we'll have your permission, I'm sorry.
Yes.
How much were we paying to feed prisoners on a daily basis utilizing prisoner cooks?
Prisoner labor, well, the feed is around $3 a day per inmate. Now, the budget this year has gone up because our inmates, we've been shortfall. I think we budgeted around, $700,000 this year for inmate food.
Would you agree that we're not going to find any vendor that's going to come to the sheriff and bring meals in for $3 a day?
Not unless they have free labor.
Okay, you mentioned the laundry. What kind of an impact is that going to have? I mean,
The what?
The laundry.
Well, the laundry, we have to obviously we do that with inmate labor. And the impact will be over $400,000 unless we get a number of quotes. That's a round figure that we've looked at today to do this.
So in the interim, you're going to have to spend money on an emergency. You said an emergency PO.
Correct.
You're going to be spending money that you have to spend in order to take care of this until we figure out what we're going to do next. Is that a safe assumption?
That's a safe assumption.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
do we use state prisoners trustees to pick up litter on the roads?
That's another component. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of roadside trash that we get a grant from the state to hire a guard and put fuel in the truck. They do over 600 road miles a year, and that's a round figure estimate of beautifying our community. That is gone. There's so many domino effects to this irresponsible action that I can't sit here and tell them all to you because I really don't know them all yet. They're just coming in hourly at the sheriff's office how it's going to affect us. And also, if we continue to cook meals, we don't contract out, I'm going to come to you, I'm going to have to hire 14 to 16 employees to do the cooking.
I got another question, sir.
Go ahead.
I know that Denny Garner's duties and responsibilities are split equally between yourself and building maintenance, so I won't address the building maintenance half, but how is this going to affect the maintenance of our patrol cars, cruisers, and equipment? I mean, I think, I don't know for sure, but I think that they did a lot of that as well. Did they not?
Do a tremendous amount of that, not only on the cruisers, the general maintenance, oil changes, brakes, rotation of tires, and on and on and on. They do a lot of that. Around the Justice Center, they do the maintenance, lawn mowing and different things like that. Denny comes and gets a number of inmates a day to help perform labor. For one example, just around the courthouse, there's 1,000 examples that he'll come out and get 5 or 10 inmates and perform labor. And I don't know if you all had the opportunity to read Captain Adams' letter, but at $10 an hour, it's astronomical what they save the taxpayers of Blount County.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Ma'am? Oh, Mike?
Yes, Mike.
Sheriff, one question. The number of state prisoners in our facility, does it matter what that count is when the Department of Corrections is looking at our numbers as far as whether or not we're overcrowded or not overcrowded?
That's a great question you ask, and that's why I don't see the purpose of using what her actions were so we wouldn't have to build a new facility. And nobody's asked for a new facility to start with, but when we go to TCI, Tennessee Correctional Institute, and they have to certify every jail in the state of Tennessee once a year, and it might be in the spring, it might be in the fall, they come in unannounced. And for round figures, say we had 600 inmates in our facility today. When they come in and check, and out of that 600, 200 of them are state inmates. So TCI deducts that 200 off. So for all practical purposes, all we have is 400 inmates in our facility. Does that make sense, that explanation?
That's my question. So it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Whether we have 400 or 0.
Correct.
That count or that number is the same, and those prisoners are not included in that number.
You're exactly right, and it's a great point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Sheriff,
Yes.
if all state inmates are effectively removed from our facility and we're left with just the local population, those waiting trial and federal inmates, the process for classifying inmates to do work, is there a possibility that some of the federal inmates can be used for work such as this, or is this that
Absolutely
against the
not.
rule?
They
Okay.
cannot be used. They're pretrial detainees, and the federal government told us on that day one, 15, 16 years ago, that they cannot be used for any work details.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
make sure I understand this correctly. We're using state prisoners, and we pay them at a rate of how much per hour?
Well, Captain Adams figured it up that he sent out. If you classify them as $10 an hour employees, which is very low for some of the specialized
So
things they do.
And no benefits.
Correct.
So, and you're going to have to replace them, interview and replace them with an employee that will have to be an employee.
Yes, correct.
And will qualify for benefits, which I think some of the lowest paid employees we have, 24,000 time benefits are added in. Looking at 34 and a half, 35,000 if I see Randy shaking his head, yes. So multiply that times 12. It's pretty good number. It's pretty significant.
It really is,
number.
and especially in today's time when we all are trying to be conservative, each and every one of you and the office holders, and to have someone recklessly do this. And not only that, at TCI, I apologized to the board of the TCI. She drove down with a couple other commissioners, but she spoke. And I apologize to the TCI board for arrogance and rudeness to the employees and some of the board members down there. I apologize at a podium, and she represents Blount County. We've always been head and shoulders, in my opinion, and the state's opinion also, of any other county in the state of Tennessee. And to have to go down there and apologize for a commissioner that has no right, has no authority to be involved in that type of function. That's not in the scope of her jurisdiction, or authority, excuse me. The jurisdiction is wrong, that word. But anyway, I can keep on, but I'm just here to warn you and tell you that we're going to have some consequences and hurdles in front of us that we're going to have to deal with. And it's not something we can pick and choose. I mean, it's going to be mandatory. You have to feed and clothe and clean these areas. You know, it's not optional.
Go ahead.
So what was said at TCI triggered this, or was there other?
No, I'll just use an example that she went down to TCI and tried to, in my opinion, derail some of it, and just her action down there, which Commissioner, they wasn't prepared. They never had anybody else come into one of those board meetings today, until the other day. They wasn't prepared for a commissioner or anything. I've dealt with the TDOC, and it shows the Sheriff's Association trying to explain. issues.
I just got a copy of an Attorney General's opinion from some representative in Middle Tennessee that I don't know. Mark Whitehall.
Whitehall, I think, and I don't know which county. I don't know if it was
What was that
Campbell
about?
County or somewhere up there. I don't know exactly where it was.
Why is someone going, who went to a member of the legislature in Middle Tennessee to get an Attorney General's opinion?
It's a great question.
I was hoping you had the answer.
I wished I did.
Sharon?
Sheriff?
Yes, ma'am.
How many inmates have been moved already?
Captain Adams.
78 as of right now.
And they told us they wanted the rest of them, and there's some, except some female beds. Well, if they're so gracious in taking them, and the females we have weren't qualified and stuff, we're going to take them all, this facility, and we got to come back anyway, so we'll bring them back. They won't take them.
Have all of our workers, those who have been properly classified, particularly a concern for me is working in the kitchen. That's a significant number of employees who are doing the cooking and the delivery of the meals to the inmates on the schedule that's needed and required to keep the flow of the jail going. That's a particular concern to me. So if at some point in time, like with, immediately in the next couple of weeks, we end up with those with not enough people with the right classification to be able to hold a job in the jail, will we be forced into a position of trying to bulk up security to bring in? I mean, I don't know that the jail's ever been in a position where they've had to contract out and have food brought in.
It's never happened before, but what we will have to do in a situation like that, immediately when this happens, we will have to buy food from the outside. We're not going to bring anybody in because we don't have time to do the backgrounds and vet them, make sure they're eligible to come in our facility. So we'll have to pay a lot of overtime for the people who have to stay over to feed those areas and to deliver the food. And there's requirements. You have to have them in hot meals, certain containers, push them back there. It's a process to feed that many people in a small area. So you'll see a lot of overtime go out, plus some purchase orders to do food from the outside until we get someone vetted to come in and either hire them or contract with the company to come in and do it.
So then we would be looking at some of our officers then, our corrections officers?
Yes.
To go get food, bring it back in?
Yes, correct.
Which takes them away from the jobs that they're supposed
Correct.
to
Or
be
pay
doing.
overtime. We'll have to bring some in, mandatory overtime, and pay them.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
How many tons of trash does our litter pickup crew remove from the streets and the roads of this county a year?
It's hundreds of thousands of pounds. To give an exact number, I don't have that with you. My memory serves me. It's been 500-600. Last year, maybe 200,000 or 300,000. John did some research.
It's in that letter.
He said a couple 100,000 pounds, I think, in that. But I was thinking it was more than that. But that I might be including the dump site. And you add the dump site that we do on Saturdays with that, then it gets up in the 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 pound range. Up to 600 road miles a year. And in Blount County, they just got in the county about 1,200 road miles. So we're getting more than half a year out here.
219,500 pounds.
And that's not including the dump site, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that's where it'll be the most obvious when we lose these.
I agree with that.
That's going to be the immediate impact on the community.
Especially with the tourism that we have, that gears our economy in Blount County. And they come here because it's a beautiful place. Now they can get away from this relatively quick.
Is there any other questions or any more discussion?
We need to have a call meeting in the near future, or is it too early to tell?
We'll be able to tell you by this week unless TDOC does something different.
I think that's possible.
And I can't spend more than I've got, obviously, and I need to come to you with the commission, the body, with some issues. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Refinancing update, Randy?
Yes, I wanted to make sure that everyone here was aware. As you know, we have 4 swaps, and we have with Blount, well, Blount County has 6 swaps. 2 are for hospital-related debt and 4 are for general county debt. And our counterparty is Deutsche Bank. And Deutsche Bank has received a downgrade in their credit rating, which triggers a provision in our contract with them that they have certain amount of time, 30 days, to act. They did not act in accordance with that 30 days, which is at their liberty, and we now have acted, and we are pursuing all options that are available to us. We have had conversations with PFM, both Lauren, who advises us out of the Memphis office, and then our qualified investment, or our QIR, which is PFM Swap Advisors out of Philadelphia. And all that is part of the Dodd-Frank legislation that we're required to follow. And we're trying to set up a time that we can get the full commission together for a workshop, not just to deal with our refinancing, but now this plays into our refinancing as well. So we've got some options on what we can do related to the swaps themselves, whether they get novated, whether we pay part of them off, whatever that may be, there is part of the options. We have also had discussions with banks, U.S. Bank in particular, since they have our current loan agreement. That's about $78 million. We've had some discussions with them about, is that an interest that they have? Does it impact our refinancing in the event we novate the swaps? And we would report on that. And then we've also asked PFM Swap Advisors for a list of those banks that are still active players in the swap market. That is a dwindling market. We've actually heard back from one bank. I heard back Friday that one bank in particular that has been a player in swaps is no longer interested in buying or novating swaps. So you need to be expecting to receive a notice, the full commission that is, on a workshop. I'd hope to be able to do that next week, but we're not going to be ready because this has created some additional research we're going to have to do. So hopefully before the month is out, we will have a workshop on our options on our refinancing that includes what to do, if anything, on the swaps.
Is there any questions for Randy? Seeing none, item G is finance reports for information only. Item H is, I'll ask now if there's any input on items not on the agenda. Any input on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Move to adjourn.